So most of our clients usually have their e-commerce business. Some of them are new, but sometimes they scale really, really fast. So for them, all
Right.
this merchant accounts, payment processing, they see their money, but they don't really know what these terms even mean. Then we have other clients who do e-commerce for a long period of time, so they already know the struggle, basically. But let's maybe just cover the basics. What is payment processing? How does it work? And what can people understand under this term, payment processing and merchant accounts?
So again, as I mentioned, our niche is focusing on international online sellers. So payment processing, in a nutshell, is just the ability to accept payments, whether that's through a brick and mortar retail environment or online, person to person, whatever it may be, right? But again, our focus and our niche is really those global online sellers and those ones that are scaling fast, right? So I think our, who we work with and kind of our ideal client is really similar in nature. What we see, and really the reason that I joined the company is that, particularly in global payment processing, it's very hard to find a reliable, stable payment processor, right? And I think, that's where we can come in and look at this. And again, we're hooked into, I think I said 20 earlier, it's about 25 different global providers. So whether you're operating, let's say, from Dubai, which is a tax haven for a lot of these online sellers, or if you're operating in Europe, which typically has a lot more regulatory red tape and scrutiny, or if you're operating in Hong Kong, or if you're operating in the US or Australia, instead of you having to go out and kind of hack this on your own and like figure it out, we're able to kind of be that one-stop shop to really guide the merchant and get them to the right place for their business type. So I think the misconception of payment processing is that it's one size fits all, when it's really not, especially in global payments, right? If you're working with a provider that doesn't have local payment methods or local currencies in certain regions, it can really impact your conversions, right? So when you're looking at a provider, it's, again, not one size fits all. And the other problem is that a lot of providers will say that they can do certain things, but me being in the industry so long, I can kind of call them out and really see if it's BS or not. And sometimes it can lack technical integrations if it's not a hosted or like a native integration, and it pops out to a third-party payment page, right? So there's all these little nuances here that you got to be careful with as an online seller that's new. So we're really here to help guide these sellers to find the right provider, get the reliability so they don't have these funding holds, and really just be that person they can lean on for questions if they need answers to something.
When it comes to the people who use, for example, Stripe or Shopify payments or Air Wallets, they most of the time scale and then they experience, okay, now I have these problems. Now suddenly they hold back my money, or they keep some kind of reserve, or sometimes they even hold back all the money until they refute my account further. Why these problems even occur? Why is it not that I just put into a place this payment processing and then it works? I can scale to 5 million per month, for example. Why those problems even occur?
There's a little bit of history behind this here, because the environment today is different than what it used to be. I remember Stripe when they were like a 10, 20 person company back in like 2009. I mean, that's how far along Stripe has gone. It was very easy to board. They're set up as what's called a PayFac, or a payment facilitator. So you can instantly onboard, like we use Stripe. It's super simple and you can just board and you don't really have a lot of red tape, right? And we use other providers too. I'm not just saying we use Stripe, but what's changed though is that recently Wells Fargo was the sponsor bank behind the scenes, which gave them a lot of autonomy to make certain underwriting and credit decisions. And now the bank sponsorship has dissolved. So now there's a different bank behind the scenes that's working with Stripe. And they've changed some of the underwriting criteria, right? Making it tougher for some of these online sellers to sell, whether it's even in their domestic market or globally. The other thing, there's different risk triggers that a lot of clients are unaware of, because we get clients coming to us almost 2 to 3 times a day about a funding hold. When you're selling internationally, it's a higher risk trigger, right? So there's more fraud that happens cross-border than in domestic markets. When you're doing drop shipping, for example, that's a higher risk vertical. So if you don't have the supply in a warehouse and it's made to order, that's a higher risk because if something happens with the manufacturer or something during the supply chain, it can cause issues, cause refunds, returns, or chargebacks even. It also depends on what you're selling, right? So if you're selling medical devices, if you're selling things that have certain promises or guarantees, or if you have like high pressure upsells, right? You're trying to increase your average order value. All these things start to trigger a review or a hold, or even your online reviews can trigger a review for Stripe. So the decks are already stacked against an online seller. The deck's more stacked against an international seller. The deck's stacked again even more against a drop shipper, right? So you're kind of adding these nuances to it because Stripe now is more regulated now more than ever. So that kind of gives you a little bit of history there in terms of like the why. And Shopify Payments, the backend is Stripe, right? They're in a strategic partnership. Shopify Payments ultimately has to adhere to Stripe's rules. There is flexibility to a degree, but ultimately Stripe is calling the shots, right? And the same goes for Airwallex to a degree. There's more flexibility with Airwallex. We work with them quite often, but they're still having a bank behind the scenes, which in the U.S. is J.P. Morgan. So there's someone behind the scenes is ultimately calling the shots they got to answer to.